So let's look at an example of how we'd use try. So here we've created a try block, and everything inside this block will execute, and it'll execute normally until there's an exception raised. If there's an exception raised, it will jump to look for an exception handler. And in this case, we have an exception handler for the IO error exception. So if that's raised, it'll be handled here. And then after the try block finishes, we'll continue with the print. Note that there's a few things in this code you might not have seen yet. You should be starting to get comfortable with that. If you're confused by things like, for example, this line here, you can probably figure out on your own what it does, either looking through the documentation or trying it in the interpreter. So let's try running this code. And I'm trying it in a directory that does not have any trippy file. And we can see what happens when this line executed. The exception was thrown. It was an IO error exception. That got bound to the variable E. And then when we print out the error, we can see error reading file, the message that came with the exception. And then after that, it doesn't return here. Execution continues following the try block at the print statement. One of the things exceptions do is make it much harder to follow the flow of execution of a program. Code can jump all around. It's different from procedures, which do make code jump around. But when we call a procedure normally and it returns normally, we know it's always going to come back to the same point. With exceptions, anywhere in here can jump to another place. So now I've created a file called trippy, but I've made it unreadable. Don't worry if you don't understand these commands. These are just ways to create a file and make it unreadable. And now I'm going to try again. And we see we still got the IO error exception, but the message is different. Now we got a permission failure because we don't have permission to read the file that exists there. Let's make the file readable and try again. Now we get something different. So now the open succeeded. We got to the next line. The next line does a read line. That succeeded. We read in the line, what a trip. And then we got to the next line, which tries to convert that line to a number using the int constructor. That threw a value error exception. And so when an exception is raised inside a try block, it jumps to the exception handlers. The IO error exception handler doesn't match value error. So it doesn't handle it. There's no exception handler that does handle the value error. So that exception gets raised to the next level, in this case causing the program to crash. And that's why instead of ever getting to continuing, we got this error when we ran the program.